So thank you for joining us this morning. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning, Marcus Seppa. He's a speaker and stand-up comedian and YouTube content creator who helps professionals engage their audience. He's a 3-time TEDx speaker. Marcus draws on 13 years in executive compensation strategy, as well as insights from the comedy stage to connect humor and enthusiasm. Marcus is based in Basel, Switzerland, where he runs Comedy Basel, the first independent comedy club in town. Marcus is a distinguished Toastmaster, an officer of the Basel International Speakers Club, and an expert in hybrid meetings. You can find all of his videos about hybrid meetings at marcuspresents.com and on YouTube. Today, he'll be sharing his insights on how to run effective and inclusive hybrid meetings. Please join me in giving Marcus a warm District 35 welcome.
Thank you very much, everybody, for that. Welcome to today's session about inclusive and effective hybrid meetings. A hybrid meeting combines in-person participants and online participants into what should be one harmonious meeting experience, as illustrated on the graphic here. This is kind of what it can look like in theory. In practice, it can look like this. This is an example of a hybrid meeting setup from my club, Basel International Speakers. So what I want to share with you today are some thoughts about how to run these hybrid meetings as well as you can. In our club, we've been running them for about 2 years. I have been running hybrid meetings in my corporate life for longer than that. And there are many challenges, but hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will have some good answers to those challenges as well. So I'm going to keep talking for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to jump into some questions and answers from your end. So, in order to run an effective hybrid meeting, you will need essentially 6 things. You need a microphone in the room to pick up the voices of the people in the room. You need a loudspeaker in the room so the people in the room can hear. You need cameras in the room so that everybody can be seen. And this in particular is super important for that inclusion aspect. Then you need a screen in the room so that the people who are in the room can see all the Zoom participants. You need software to run the meeting. Zoom is a really good choice here. We'll come back into that in a little bit. It's actually good for 2 reasons. And then you need an internet connection as well. So these are the 6 things that we're going to cover in today's session. And I'm going to show you some budget examples and some high quality examples as well. When I teach my hybrid meeting course, I actually have a 7th component as well. It's going to be one of these. But for this session, we're going to stick with these 6 components. So a hybrid meeting can look like this. For example, this is an example of the kind of typical hybrid meeting that we run in Basel International Speakers. Let's start with the audio part. So I want to talk about microphones first, but in fact, I want to talk about microphones and loudspeakers in one session. And the reason for this is that the setup that I would recommend you use is a conference speakerphone, and that will handle audio in and audio out at the same time. So what can that look like in terms of getting our audio set up? Well, here's the first version of this, and this is in fact my current preferred hybrid meeting setup. The device that you see near the camera there on the left-hand side, that is a conference speakerphone, and that model specifically is the biodynamic space. So what it is that it has 4 microphones in it and 1 speaker setup, and it is going to pick up the voices of everybody in the room, and it's also going to be able to transmit the voices of the people from from Zoom who are joining the meeting online. So conference speakerphone is a great choice. This is the newest one, and the newest speakerphone that I have, and the reason why I like this one is because the audio quality is really, really good. I'm hearing a baby in the background, I believe. So the person with the baby in the background, please go ahead and mute your microphone. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe I got heckled by a baby. Anyway, let's continue. Here is another audio setup. And by the way, in this picture, you can also see, maybe we can put it a little bit bigger. So here you can also see on the right-hand side of the picture, that is a webcam. We're going to talk more about cameras in a little bit. The other audio solution that I've used and I would also recommend is a conference speakerphone like this. This specifically is the PolySync 40. It is a conference speakerphone that is designed specifically for meeting rooms. This one is a small, the one that we looked at previously, the biodynamic space, is more designed for personal use and for very small meetings. It does work even up to like 12, 15 feet, but it's better when it's very close to the speaker. And the reason why we have placed it here next to the speaking area is because it gives us that better quality. So this kind of conference speakerphone is another solution. And you see some other cameras and stuff. We're going to talk about more about that in a moment as well. Here is another audio setup. So whereas both of these setups, these previous ones, they had kind of a little bit more advanced setups in terms of cameras, this is what I call my core decent quality setup. So it doesn't have a fancy camera. Instead, it has a camera on the laptop, the selfie camera on the laptop, which is pointed towards the left-hand side where the stage is. And then we have a camera on the phone there, which is pointed at the audience, the right-hand side. There's a projector, and then there is a PolySync 20 conference speakerphone. And this is a pretty decent setup. You may already have a projector, and if you just invest in like a phone tripod and a conference speakerphone, you can get a hybrid meeting running for under $200. So the conference speakerphone is my preferred solution, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the ones that I've talked about here. This is an older model. Excuse me. This is an older model that I've used in the past. You may have seen this in most of my videos. Like if we go back to my most popular hybrid meeting videos, I was using this older equipment. I wouldn't recommend this particular model because it's old and the battery life is not good. But it's just to show you that you can run hybrid meetings with very different kinds of equipment. However, it doesn't have to be a conference speakerphone. If all you have is $15, then you can still run a hybrid meeting. If you look at this photo here, let's put that full screen. So if you look at that photo here, we have Nina, who is one of our founding members of Basel International Speakers here. She is speaking in our meeting room there. This is an older setup, and there's some limitations in here that are not great. But the microphone that I've mounted here is a $15 lavalier microphone, which is connected with a wire into the laptop. And then the audio out is actually handled by that Bluetooth speakerphone, that kind of greenish yellowish thing that you see in the front there. So it doesn't have to be a conference speakerphone, and so long as all of the audio is being run through this laptop, then you're going to be okay. Even though a conference speakerphone is the easiest solution, you can certainly use two different devices for in and out, so long as they both run through the one laptop, or so long as they both run through the same phone, because that's the only way that you're going to avoid audio feedback in your hybrid meeting. So $15 lavalier microphone, and I've just clipped it onto this mic stand. That's a really simple solution. Here is another solution. Let's put that like that. So here is another solution that I do recommend for certain applications. This microphone is called this type of microphone is called a boundary microphone. It's called that because it uses the table as a boundary, and this specific microphone, it picks up voices of people in the 180 degrees in front of it. So it rejects voices coming from the back, and it picks up voices coming from the front in this setup. And this is a good solution to one of the problems that can happen in a hybrid meeting, is that when people in the room, when they whisper to each other, a conference speakerphone that is going to pick up 360 degrees around it, that is going to pick up those whispers as well, whereas a more directional microphone like this is going to pick up less of those whispers. And this also gives a very high quality audio experience. We're going to look at some more examples as well. If you're getting a little bit confused about all the gear that I'm talking about, you can actually find all of the gear that I use for my whole setup at marcuspresents.com/gear. That's a link to my kit over there, and I can put a link in the chat later on as well if you want to have the exact URL. So a boundary mic like this is a pretty good way to pick up the voices of somebody who's maybe walking around on stage a little bit, because it has that 180 degree pickup pattern. If you don't want that, there's other solutions. You can actually use a microphone like this as well on stage. So this is mounted on a mic stand, and it is in fact the same microphone I'm using right now. This is the Samsung Q2U, and this setup has the benefit of that it really only picks up voices from directly in front of it. So if I move away my mic a little bit to the side here, like so, you are not going to be able to hear really what I'm saying. If I move my microphone back, it brings it back. So this kind of microphone is going to be great if you want to really eliminate any kind of distracting noises from either from that projector that you see there, or from people talking behind you. So I hope you're getting the idea here that we can have many different audio setups for your hybrid meeting, and it doesn't always have to be great to get started. You can get started with a $15 microphone. As we're going to do an extensive Q&A session later on, feel free to ask any questions that you have about audio. We talked about microphones, we talked about loudspeakers. Next up, I want to talk about cameras. So audio is of course the most important part of running a great hybrid meeting, because if people can't hear you, then you're not having a meeting at all. Cameras are important as well. They're kind of a secondary importance. But the reason why I say cameras in plural is that I ultimately recommend that you have one camera pointing at the stage area, and then you have 1 or 2 or 3 cameras pointing at the audience. And it's important for the online participants to see the in-room audience. From an inclusion perspective, because the people who are in the room, they can already see everybody who's on the Zoom meeting if everybody has their camera on. But if the audience who are online, if they can only see like 1 or 2 people in the room, that is going to create a lack of inclusion. So here's one way to set up cameras. Actually, here are 2 ways to set up cameras. No, there's actually 3 ways in this picture. So the main camera there, that is my real camera. Is the same camera I make for YouTube videos and Amazon videos about. That's the Canon M50. It's pointed at the stage, and the stage is on the left-hand side. So the projector is on the right-hand side, and the projector screen is on the right-hand side, and the stage is on the left-hand side. So that camera is pointing at the speaker, and it gives us a very high-quality video feed of the speaker. Then you see, let's put it like that. You see on the bottom right-hand side of this image, there is a phone. And the purpose of that phone is to show at least some of the audience to the online participants. So this is one of the phones that I use to join the same Zoom meeting so that I can show the in-room participants to the online audience. Usually I use a second phone, but I'm actually using that phone to take the photo. So that's why you only see one phone, but usually I have 2. And then the laptop, of course, has its own built-in camera. And if you are, so the Canon camera is connected to the laptop, but during the meeting, I could switch between the 2 different cameras so that if I wanted to show my own face while I'm sitting at the laptop, I could. And in fact, this was something that I do quite often as well. If I'm, for example, the timekeeper and I want to be at my laptop when I'm giving my timekeeper's report, I don't want to bring my notes all the way to the stage. In the previous version, you saw a real camera, the Canon M50, and that's like a $700 camera. You don't need a $700 camera. You can use this setup as well, which is a webcam. This is an $80 webcam, and it's actually standing on a it's standing on a what do you call it? A desk clamp. Yeah. So that's an extendable desk clamp that is clamped onto the table, and then the webcam is mounted on it. That desk clamp is actually super useful for hybrid meetings. You can use it for a lot. I actually use one of them right now to hold up one of my lights. So a webcam like this, it's connected to the laptop, also a very solid option. And so long as it's close enough to, you can see that the speaking area is right where that clamp is connected. So long as that webcam is very close to the speaker, like 2 feet or something like that, then it's going to be okay. It won't work for any longer distances, whereas the Canon M50 that you saw here, that will work at a longer distance because it has a zoom lens. So that's one approach to hybrid meeting cameras. Here's another approach. This is not a good approach, but I'm including here because this was the first hybrid meeting setup that we ever used in our club. You can even see our club banner there. So in this setup, the stage is on the right-hand side, or like the top side of the image. So this was when we didn't know what we were doing. We're just figuring it out. We didn't have a projector. So the laptop screen actually was the way for us to show the online participants to the in-room participants. And then the phone's selfie camera was the camera directed at the stage. And then the laptop selfie camera was the camera picking up the audience. Not a great setup, but we made it work. And we had an effective hybrid meeting with this early setup. And then we learned and then we grew. Here's another version of the camera setup, like a very similar version. So in this setup, we actually changed, we swapped the phone and the laptop. So we had the laptop camera pointing at the stage, which is on the near side of this photo. And then that phone is directed at the audience. Very simple hybrid meeting setup, one of the first setups that we did. And then if we talk about the kind of current model of our hybrid meeting setup, it kind of looks like this. You can see that in this version of the setup, there is a phone on the far side of the table that's there to pick up the audience, whereas the camera on the left is directed towards the far side of the table where the stage is. And this is actually a better representation because you don't want to have two cameras pointing at the same direction because it doesn't add anything. In this setup, the phone is actually picking up the reverse angle of the Canon camera. One power tip that I have here is that you should match the presenter audio and camera. So if you're going to be connecting your camera to your laptop, then make sure that you also connect your audio to the same laptop. In theory, you might be thinking, okay, let's just run the camera on the laptop and then let's connect the audio to the phone because it has a Bluetooth connection. But what you will miss then is that you will get a mismatch between where the audio is coming from, like which Zoom square has the audio and which Zoom square has the video. And that's something that you don't want to do because you want to have a nice match between those two. Let's move on here. I'm going to say briefly about using a real camera as a webcam. If you have a real camera, it could be a DSLR, could be a mirrorless camera like I'm using, could be a GoPro, could be a cinema camera, could be a camcorder. Most cameras these days you can turn into a webcam with free software and a USB cable. Check your manufacturer. I'm using the Canon M50. Canon was one of the first manufacturers to come out with this webcam utility, so you can just turn it into a webcam with a USB cable. Here's another version of our hybrid meeting setup, but one of the early versions, and you can see that there are actually two cables coming out of that Canon camera. One of them is a power cable, the other one is a USB cable. Do not try to run a hybrid meeting on batteries, especially on the camera. I did it, I tried, wasn't a good idea. I also tried to run my laptop on batteries. One time it worked, and then in the next time we did a different setup with a webcam and the battery died. Don't do it. Get power. So in the previous versions, I used the Canon camera as the main camera, but here's another solution, and that is to use a phone as a main camera, and that's actually what I'm doing in this setup. So we have the stage area right here near the camera. I have the Poly conference speakerphone on the bottom left-hand corner of this picture, and then I have a phone mounted as a camera on that Smart Rig Select tripod, no, the desk clamp rather. So that's another way to do it. You don't need a fancy camera to run a hybrid meeting. You don't need a separate webcam to do it. You can do it with your phone. So we talked a little bit about the three most important things: microphones, loudspeakers, and cameras. Now I just want to say one thing about the screen. Whatever screen your room has is probably going to be good enough. In our setup, we use a projector. If you have a TV in your room, then use the TV. You do need to have, well, you don't need to, but it's a good idea to have one point of attention that everybody looks at the screen. If people have their laptops out, which is not something that I recommend because the risk of audio feedback is too big, but if people have their laptops out, then you're going to have a weird kind of experience, which is not necessarily bad, but you just have to be ready for it. That some people are going to be looking at the screen, some people are going to be looking at the laptop, but if the person speaking is in the room, like if I'm on the left hand, if I'm on the near side of this photo where the stage is, and I'm speaking, some people are going to be looking at the screen while I'm speaking in the room. It sounds weird, but it will happen. So you have to get used to that as well. So whatever screen you have in the room is probably good enough. The projector we have is not very good, but it's good enough. Like you kind of just need to be able to see some shapes on there and potentially share some slides.
Good.
Next up, we're going to say just a few words about two other items here, namely the software and the internet connection. For software, I don't really have too much to say other than that we usually use Zoom. And one thing, actually two things that I like about Zoom for hybrid meetings. One is that it's very easy to log in with multiple devices into the same Zoom meeting, and that's really beneficial for adding those extra cameras. The second point about Zoom, I'm blanking on my second point about Zoom. Maybe it'll come back to me. There's another reason that I like Zoom as well. Oh yeah, it's because in Zoom you can set up your meeting so that you can join the meeting before it even starts. So if I'm the host of the meeting, but I'm not actually running the hybrid meeting on that day, somebody else can start the meeting even if I'm not there. So I recommend using that checkbox that says participants can join anytime. I think it is. Previously it was called you can join before the host. And of course, whichever software you have is probably going to be fine. I think a lot of clubs use Zoom, which is not a bad choice at all. It's actually a really good choice. Then you, of course, need a strong internet connection in the venue. And that could be a challenge. If your internet connection is not strong, it can look like this. What happened here is that we lost a large chunk of the capacity in our internet connection, and the only video that you see is actually the video from the room. All the other squares went black here when we lost our capacity. But what actually ended up happening is that, and now I'm reminded of my second point, what actually ended up happening here is that the audio kept working. So Zoom is really good, and here's why I like Zoom. Zoom is really good at prioritizing the right thing, which in this case is the audio, because audio is more important than video. So this is what can happen when your internet capacity is really constrained. When it's zero, this can happen. This is an example from our hybrid meeting where we completely lost the Wi-Fi connection, and I had to move over the whole meeting into running from my mobile phone. So the data connection on my mobile phone. So what I did here is that I ran the meeting on the phone that is on the podium there on the left-hand side. I connected my phone to the mobile data network, and then I connected that conference speakerphone there on the table to my phone so that we had high-quality audio in and out over that data connection. And then that second phone, which is on the bottom right-hand corner of the photo, I used that to show the in-room audience, or at least a portion of the in-room audience, to the online audience. So it is entirely possible to run a hybrid meeting with just mobile devices like I was doing here. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but you can. So our list of requirements for hybrid meetings is this. Get yourself some microphones, some loudspeakers, cameras, screens, software, and an internet connection. Gonna have a quick look at my time here. Okay, so I'm gonna give you one more tip here. So this is a really good place to start, and most, like the audio devices, you can use them either like a separate microphone and a speaker, or you can do a one device, which is a conference speakerphone. But there's another type of device that could be a good solution for you if you're doing especially if you're in a corporate club and you have a bigger budget. This is a video bar, and it has 3 of those devices in one. It has a camera, it has microphones. In fact, there's 6 microphones in there, and it has a speaker system. So what it actually does is that it uses the microphones to determine who is speaking, and then it zooms in on that person. And this is a really powerful way of creating that kind of sense of everybody's in the same meeting. Because when somebody is speaking, especially if they're sitting around the table, this device will just pick them up and zoom in on them automatically. And this is what it looks like when it's placed in that same meeting room of ours. So that is a little bit about the technology side. I'd be very happy to answer some questions about that in the Q&A session. When it comes to the inclusion side of hybrid meetings, I'm actually going to stop my screen sharing there. When it comes to the inclusion side of hybrid meetings, I mentioned one of the things already, namely it's important to have multiple cameras so that the online participants can feel that they're in the meeting by seeing everybody. Another very important part of a hybrid meeting in terms of inclusion is that you try to treat everybody the same. And so you, as a leader, as maybe you're the Toastmaster of the evening, maybe you're the general evaluator, it's up to you to make sure that everybody gets as similar an experience as possible. You don't want to have kind of second-class citizens, right? And there was another organization where I presented, and they had this idea that we call them different things. We call the people in the room, we call them the roomies, and then we call the people in the room, we call them zoomies. And I strongly discourage that kind of behavior because I don't think these labels add anything. You should make sure that everybody gets the same experience regardless of how they want to join. And at least in our club, we have a lot of people who are sometimes there in person and there's sometimes there online. And they don't have to tell me or anybody else in advance how they want to attend. We are there to make sure that they get the experience that they want, and we are there to serve them. And this also reminds me of the introduction that we had from Jason at the very beginning of the meeting, is that we as club officers and people running the meetings, we are there to serve the members. So in our case, if our members want to join online or they want to join in room, that is completely up to them. It is up to us to make that happen. And we have gone through a situation where initially there were 10 people in the room, then we went down when the different waves of lockdowns came, we went to there were only 2 people in the room. I have run, I think, 1 or 2 meetings when I was the only person in the room, everybody else was Zoom, to the meeting that we had this week where I believe we had something like 8 people in the room and the rest on Zoom. So it's really up to us to build that kind of inclusive environment by taking that inclusion with us to the leadership roles as well. The last tip I want to give you about that inclusion aspect is that, especially when you're in the room, you don't know what the experience for the online participants is. So it's up to you to really ask them. I typically ask people at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting if they have any feedback on the setup. And often, like most of the time, I make some change, right? I usually move the speaker, the conference speaker from closer, or which. Well, okay. Maybe I shouldn't say about you. I don't have the bandwidth to understand how the people in the Zoom part are experiencing, so I have to ask them. And I have to welcome and encourage them to share their feedback on that as well. And that is not only great for ensuring that the technical setup works, it also helps us run the meeting together. And that's another important part of inclusion, I think. So that is about 30 minutes of my presentation. I'll be happy to end the prepared remarks there and go over to any questions that we have. And for the question and answer session, let's do it like this, that you can put, you can indicate to Jason if you want to, actually, Jason, I'm going to leave it up to you to explain how you want to do it, whether you want to take questions via chat or raise their hand, and then Jason's going to ask those questions to me or potentially direct the person to ask them directly. Jason's going to be in charge, so over to you, sir.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Marcus. Let's give Marcus a round of applause for what he's already shared with us today. Thank you very much for those wonderful ideas. And we do have until 10:10 actually to ask questions, 10:10 our time, of course, 10 after the hour, to ask Marcus any questions that come up. The direction I'll give is either please put your question in the chat or use the raise hand function under reactions, and I will either read the chat questions and share them with Marcus, or call on you individually to unmute and ask your question. So one of the questions that was posted early on was, why do you prefer OBS over other things such as other software such as Ecamm and such?
I actually haven't tried Ecamm, but from what I understand, it's a product for Macs. I use PC. I don't have any love or hate for Ecamm. What I like about OBS, though, I can say that I love that it's free. It's open source. It's available on all platforms. There are so many good guides on how to use it. There are almost unlimited plugins to make OBS work in any kind of scenario. So, and this may not be obvious. I used OBS Studio to share the slides, but I'm also using OBS Studio for audio. Right, so my audio is routed through OBS, and I'm using 3 different filters on there. One is I'm using a compressor filter, which lowers the loudest parts of my speech. I use a noise suppression filter because I have traffic next to me and I have a fan next to me. I hope that you are not able to hear that because I'm using noise suppression. And then I'm even adding a 100 millisecond delay to my audio so that my audio and video should be in sync. I don't think that you can do that with Ecamm. But
Yes,
don't quote me on that.
No, but thank you for that, Marcus. There was a follow-up. What is OBS? And someone did post this open broadcaster software, and I think you described well how you use that tool to.
I can actually, I can show you. I can just share my screen right here.
That'd be great.
And there we go. There we go. So this is OBS Studio. This is what so when I'm sharing my slides, I have on the left-hand side, I have the kind of preview, and then I can switch it over to the right-hand side, and then I can switch between these different things here. There's many other things that I can do with OBS as well, and you know, I can do timer cards. I can play video clips. You know, play a little video clip that it doesn't have audio at the moment. All kinds of things that I can do with OBS. So this is it's a very powerful video production and live streaming software.
Great, thank you. There was a comment about the amount of cables on the table and if that affects your member experience at all, or if you've had any comments about that.
No, I don't think anybody commented on that. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of cables in a hybrid meeting for sure, and lots of extension cables. I have extension cables for power and for USB and all of that. I don't think that's the most important thing in my opinion.
Thanks, Marcus. Tony Cooper, I see your hand raised. Come off mute and ask your question.
Marcus, can I ask a question as a takeaway? Is it possible to get labels on frames with the specific setups? And is it possible to get labels for each of the pieces of equipment so that you understand what the pieces of equipment are? And then a brief statement of advantages and disadvantages someplace on the frame.
I have different versions of it. Let's see. I don't think I have something ready to go. I'm gonna see if I can find a clip here. I'm gonna show you an example of this. Just gonna switch back to this for 5 seconds and then come back. So when I do my YouTube videos, I usually put a little label like you saw there on there, but I don't really have anything ready to go at the moment. Another aspect is also that when I get new equipment that's better, I don't recommend the old one anymore. So like one of the older conference speakerphones, the Callisto 7200. Yes, I've talked about it, but I don't really recommend it anymore. I can actually put a, let's see if I can find that link for you real quick. I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is going to be my affiliate link for where you can see all the gear that I'm using. I'm just going to drop that in the chat right there. So this is actually my Amazon page where you can see all of the equipment that I use and recommend. But no, to answer your question, I don't have a complete equipment list with the pros and cons. For conference speakerphones, the Biodynamic Space is just such a great device in terms of the audio. Just go with that. And like for things like tripods, it doesn't really matter what you use. So long as your tripod holds your camera up, you'll be okay.
Thank you. Patrick, you have your hand raised. If you could unmute and ask your question, please.
Okay, so when you were talking about all these different devices, you kind of seem like you're at the point of only $200. is there some clubs think $200 is going to be way too expensive to even start. So ballpark wise, and I know based on how good the quality and all that, what's the lowest? Can you get to 60 without being, I mean, I know the lower the price usually going to be the lower quality, but if we could get like a $60 package to start all clubs, and then clubs that are successful can go more options or something like that. That's what I'm looking at. What's like the bottom rung price wise?
Let me put this on the screen. Let's see, full screen projector right there. And if I go into, so this is our earliest hybrid meeting setup. And if I look at the equipment here, I already had the camera from before. I already had the speaker. I already had the phone from before, and then the tripods from before. So this is a $15 setup in the sense that I got that microphone for $15. And in terms of, so that was for audio in, right? For audio out, the quality of the audio out is actually not so important. So you could use your laptop speakers for audio out. You could be, if somebody has a Bluetooth speaker, you can use that for audio out. The projector there, it has speakers. They are garbage, but it has speakers. That could also be audio out. Your TV could be audio out. So, and then as we looked at in the other versions, let's see if I can quickly go back to those other versions here. When we talked about cameras and things, even in this setup, our very first hybrid meeting setup, that's that $15 microphone there, that Bluetooth speaker, and we only used built-in cameras, the built-in camera in the phone and in the laptop, and it worked fine. Like, it worked okay. So I would say if you can get a Bluetooth, if you have some kind of speaker, bring it, use the laptop speakers, otherwise, and get a $15 microphone and you'll be fine.
Great, thank you, Marcus. Similarly, on the role of equipment, there's a question if you're familiar with the technology called the OWL. That's a camera and speaker and microphone combined, and they're interested in your thoughts on that technology. Other than it being expensive, I think, but
yeah, that product is called the Meeting Owl Pro from a company called Owl Labs. I haven't tried it though, and I've had many conversations with Owl Labs trying to get them to sponsor one of my videos so we can feature them on my YouTube channel, but those conversations have not been successful. I'm not going to let that item cloud my judgment. I've heard other people have good experiences, but it costs $1,000. And if you get all the extra accessories, it's like $1,300 or something like that. So it may not be accessible for every community club. From what I understand, it seems to be a decent device. There is an inherent limitation, because what it is it's just a little box that you put at the center of the table, and then it has like a 360 camera, and it has audio in and out. That does come with an inherent limitation, because the best place for the microphone might actually be next to the stage and not in the center of the table. Mm-hmm. So by having a separate conference speakerphone that you can handle audio separately from cameras is quite valuable, I think.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Robert Wall, you have your hand raised. Please come off mute and ask your question.
Yeah, my question with the hybrid meeting thing is, obviously this is lugging equipment around. And if you're talking about like a projector and a camera and stuff, that's not that big of a deal. But have you run into any really good solutions for like portable screens and that sort of thing? Or do you just kind of rely on the venue to have that sort of stuff? Because this is a lot of stuff for someone to load into their car and truck around if it's not a club that has some sort of a permanent meeting space.
Yeah. We used to, so some of the equipment is in our venue. So the screen is owned by the venue. It's always there. The projector is something that we keep in our club's cupboard. So in that venue, there's a number of cupboards in the back. Maybe I can show you an example of this. Let's see. Actually, if I put that on screen there, let's do a screen share real quick. Share that. There we go. So in the back of our venue, there are a number of cupboards, and the one that's on the right-hand side of that image, that's our cupboard. So that's where we keep the projector and all the other equipment, like the power strips and things like that. So in fact, the only thing that I do actually bring to each meeting, if I have my more limited setup without the fancy camera, it all fits in a small day pack. So it's a conference speakerphone. It's a conference speakerphone, a tripod like this, a couple of these tripods, or potentially the desk clamp that I showed you before. So because we're able to store most of our gear in the club meeting room, is not really a problem. And also most of our members don't drive. We rely on public transit. So it's a very small bag that I bring with you. When I bring my more fancy setup, it's a bigger backpack, but it's usually usually just one bag. So if you can store things at the venue, that's certainly valuable. And in terms of portable screens, I haven't tried. I have one from way back, but it's not something that I've really looked into. So no great insights there.
Great, thank you. Kind of along that vein, how much time does it take to set up a hybrid meeting as you've described it? And how many people does your club have involved? Is this a sergeant arms duty, a special technology role, a thing you've personally taken on as a charge? Interested in how you handle that and what you recommend clubs potentially do for that.
Absolutely. So that's actually a really good question, and it's a question where I recommend that you do something that I don't. So in my club, I have basically set up the hybrid meetings. All the equipment is mine. I've gotten some of it for free from the manufacturers because I feature them in my video, so I haven't had to pay for almost any of it. So I'm a little bit in a different position like that. So most of the equipment is mine. I like playing around with it. I like, you saw most of the photos that I've been taking. I've taken them either before the guests arrive or after, just because I have my YouTube channel. So the way I do it is not ideal. I usually arrive 1 or 2 hours before the meeting starts to set it up. That is not necessary for normal people to do. I also like to always change the setup. Like, I don't think we've had the same setup twice. So I always like to fiddle around with things. Sometimes I run OBS on the laptop in order to show like word of the day on the screen, for example. There's all kinds of things that I do that most people don't. Let's see, I wonder, do I have my word of the day template loaded? I don't. Fair enough. So but I can look at a couple of examples of where I helped other Toastmasters clubs start their hybrid meetings, and my recommendation to them was, be there an hour before. When I have tried this, the last time I tried this, they came like 20 minutes before, and that was way too short. In the way I like it, you cannot set it up in 20 minutes. And since they were doing it for the first time, it just didn't really work. And I've seen some other examples of that. So definitely reserve at least 30 minutes for your hybrid meeting setup. And like, it's not only about setting it up, it's also about testing it. Right? You can set it up as well as you want, but until you get some actual feedback from the online participants, you don't really know how it's going to be. So what we have done in our club is that I have been in charge of the hybrid meetings, and then our sergeant at arms, he has also set up some of the most recent meetings, because we realized that we needed a second person or potentially a third person to do it as well. So the meeting that we had this week, I specifically said that, okay, I'm just going to be sitting here and I will answer your questions if you want something, but please do this by yourself. And it was, it was like 80% good setup. Mm-hmm. But then the key was also that we were able to adjust it as we went along. Like, for example, specifically, we adjusted the camera angle. He didn't think about it because he hadn't done it before. So I gave him the recommendation to change the angle, and we did. And definitely have more than one people. Definitely have more than one person doing it. Don't do it like I do.
Yeah, I appreciate that advice. I think the other thing I heard in there and heard all along is the idea of experimentation, and don't be afraid to try different setups, different things, see what's working, getting that feedback. Donald, I see you have your hand raised. Please unmute and share your question. You are still muted. There you go.
My question is for the speaker in the room doing a presentation, sharing a projection, a screen projection. How do you also share that information with the audience online? Because if you look at our pictures when we do presentation, if you just look at the picture where you typically the presentation, in-person presentation is in the back. That presentation is not as clear as what we share online. So do we have a second person that manages the Zoom session to share something?
No, that's not necessary at all. The first answer, how do you do a better presentation, is the answer is don't use slides. Do everything in your power to not use slides. Do not ruin people's days by using slides. However, if you're going to be using slides, let's see if I can find an example in my slide deck here. Isn't it ironic that I look at slides when I talk about not using them? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to share that. I'm going to put this on the screen, and then let's put that full screen for you. Just one moment. I think this is going to be the right one. So this is the way we've set it up with the projector. And if the person speaking at the podium is sharing their PowerPoint presentation, which they should not do, don't do it. But if they do it, and that laptop that they have that they're doing it on, that laptop is connected to the same Zoom meeting, that presentation is going to be as clear on the projector screen here in the room as it is online. So there's absolutely no reason to duplicate any of that, so long as the person sharing it is in the same meeting. There's no added extra effort there. But I feel like I'm not really understanding your question. What is the challenge exactly there?
The challenge is in a typical in-person session, I'm projecting something on the screen. My laptop is hooked up to the projector, and I'm presenting on the screen. How do I share that with the Zoom session?
You just click on share screen.
Okay, so the person that has the laptop doing the presentation is also in the Zoom.
Correct. Yeah.
Because
That's actually what we had yesterday. We had so it was this a laptop of the Sergeant at Arms that was connected, like in the picture here. It was his Mac that was connected to the meeting, and then there was another member, our VPPR. She was presenting a slide presentation, and it appeared on the in-room projector because that was the Sergeant at Arms laptop, and he is just one of the meeting participants, and it appeared on the Zoom participant screen as well, just as any other presentation.
Great, thank you. Well, one of the chats or questions in the chat, one of my clubs works very much like the presentation you've described works, and hybrids go well. My other club is a humor club where banter is a big part of our culture. When we do hybrid, the people online banter and the people in the room banter, but we tend to keep having separate conversations and feel left out of each other's conversations. Thoughts on how to deal with that situation? Yeah,
that could be a problem that doesn't really have a great solution, because one of the kind of challenges, if you're in a, let's see, I'm going to try to see if I can find a good slide for this. Just one moment. So if you're in a hybrid meeting where you have a conference speakerphone, for example, that is going to pick up the voices of everybody in the room, and that means in practice, like, hold on, let's go back. If you're in a normal in-room meeting, people can have multiple different conversations at the same time. They can whisper to each other. In a hybrid meeting, you cannot, because that conference speakerphone will pick up the voices of everybody. So that's kind of one way of the problem. And then, of course, if you have the voices coming from the Zoom participants into the room via the conference speakerphone, that's going to interfere. So I actually don't have a great solution for that, other than saying that even if you rely on banter, maybe you need to have it a little bit more structured. Right? It's not an easy problem to solve at all, unfortunately.
Great, thanks for that question. Kurt, I see your hand raised. If you could unmute and ask your question, please.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Marcus. I've seen some of your YouTube videos and have used them for our own hybrid meeting approach. So thank you for all the content you produce. I was wondering, when it comes to the timer and then voting, those are two areas where I could see some potential issues. I was just wondering how you handle those in your hybrid meetings.
Absolutely. The easiest, like if the timer is in the room, the easiest way to solve that is to have your physical timer cards and then just point one of your phone cameras at that timing device. So I've heard some clubs, they have this system where there's one timer on Zoom, one timer in the room. That is absolute nonsense. There is no reason at all to do that. There should only be one set of timer cards, right? And I have a phone pointing at them, and then they will just appear as one of the Zoom squares. And I actually recommend having the phone like really close to the timer cards so that it kind of fills up the whole screen. And if you want to take that to the extra level, you can even move the Zoom squares around and put the timer in the top left corner, for example, so that they're always there, even if you're in speaker view. If the setup that I actually use when I'm in the room is, let's see if I can quickly go into this. Did I lose my focus? I lost my focus, right?
Yeah.
There we go. Let's see if we can come. Okay. I lost it again. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to care about the focus right now because I'm going to go into my slides here. So the slides setup that I use, let's see, let's do it like that. Okay, I am going to get my face in focus. How about that? Beautiful. There we go. Okay, cool. So the slide setup that I use is actually this. And so what you can see here in the Zoom screen, so if you have this on gallery view or you have it on speaker view, but especially if you have it on gallery view, you can see that 2/3 of my screen is filled up by the timer card, but I still remain here on video. And the reason why I've set it up like this is that let's assume that this is the camera pointing at me in the room. This is the camera pointing at the stage. If I'm running the hybrid meeting setup, I don't want to monopolize that feed. I still want to have the camera, but at the same time, I want to have a timer card that is visible to everybody. So when I do it like this with OBS Studio, this is visible to you in Zoom right now, but because this is also projected onto the projector in the room, this is also clearly visible to the person in the room. So I recommend this kind of split layout where you're keeping in mind that you should not monopolize any of the feeds because they're kind of two different audiences. We have people watching online and we have people watching in the room. And by splitting it like this with OBS Studio is a really great solution. And then for the third scenario that the timer is online, they can just use their normal Zoom cards and they will be visible to the online participants like normal. And then they can also be seen by the in-room participants because we have the projector in the room and we place the timer person in the top left corner. So those three solutions work really well. I actually have a video on my YouTube channel exactly on how to do these timer cards that I just showed you. There's like a step-by-step on how to build them. I think it was a live stream, if I remember correctly. It's really easy. There's actually like 3-4 ways of doing it in OBS. What I actually showed you here, this is done natively in OBS with like a text and a background thing. You can also do this with a video, or you can do this with no, this is an image slideshow. This is an image slideshow, but then you can also do it with natively in OBS. Anyway. Excellent. So lots of different ways. Just experiment and ask your online participants and your in-room participants, does this work for you? Like, is the camera near enough to the timer cards, etc.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Kurt, for that question. A kind of maybe simple question, Marcus. Has having hybrid helped you grow your club or at least keep its membership stable during the pandemic and our recovery from the pandemic?
I believe so, but it's hard to get any data. But I do note that other clubs here in Basel, Switzerland, they have been struggling, and we lost a couple of clubs during the pandemic as well. The fact that we were able to offer hybrid meetings starting, I believe it was June in 2020, we started doing our hybrid meetings. Like basically as soon as it was allowed, we started doing them. And I think that really helped us retain our members, and because like it helps with the retention because this is like something interesting and new. And it's also a skill that translates to the real world. Hybrid is going to be the new normal in the corporate world as well. So I think it really helped us. It also did help us attract new members. We have some members who are far away, who are not in a position to come to our meetings physically. So we were able to attract them as well. And then we were also able to retain some members who moved away from Basel to other cities in Switzerland, but they still were able to remain members of our club just because we had the hybrid option. So I think that it has helped us. It's a little bit difficult to measure how. And of course, the clubs that are still online, they could still continue doing their meetings online, and you know, good for them. I think it's nice though that we're able to offer something different than our competitors here in the city are doing.
Great, thank you. Cole, I see you have your hand raised. If you could unmute and ask your question, please.
Yeah, this is more of a general question for you, Marcus. I know you mentioned about using Zoom for your hybrid meetings. Have you ran across any other clubs or in your club in general have used Microsoft Teams? And if you switched over to Zoom, did you have any specific reasons of why you switched from Team to Zoom, like say low bandwidth or internet connection or the use of people wanting to record the meetings, things like that? Just wanted your general perspective on that.
I don't really have very strong feelings about it. I've just always used Zoom as kind of a default. Some of my corporate clients, I've worked with WebEx. In my previous corporate life, I've used Teams as well. All of them are basically doing the same thing. There are not really any super unique features that are absolutely key. So long as you can log in, even if you can't log in with the same user, if you can log in with a separate user or a guest account or something like that, that's going to work. So no strong feelings about that. All of them should be able to run a decent hybrid meetings. Just give it a go, basically.
Great, thanks for that question. Another question from the chat. If a screen's not available or a projector's not available, what's the best inclusive way to see the people joining by Zoom in the room?
All right, let's see if we can find my example of that. Well, it's not a good way, but it's a way. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna go through my slides here, see if I can find that old hybrid meeting setup. This one. Okay, I'm gonna put that on in my little Zoom frame. So here, what you can put it on speaker view if you want. But basically, I've used the laptop screen here as the screen that the in-room audience on the left-hand side can see. Not a great solution because it's too small, but that's kind of what we used. The other solution is that everybody brings their own individual laptops, but then they have to disconnect the audio, and that means going into your Zoom client and clicking leave computer audio. It does not mean muting and turning down the volume. It means disconnecting the audio. I think we're approaching like one minute or so. We're approaching the end here. So let me just drop a couple of links in the chat before we go, because I have a link here to all of my hybrid meeting videos. They are easily collected in this one playlist. So that's going to be marcuspresents.com/play/hybrid. And I have about 30 or 35 videos about hybrid meetings that basically cover everything that I've been talking about today. And the other link is the same that I dropped in earlier. Also my link on Amazon, where I basically have all the gear that I've ever talked about. And from many of those products, I've also made videos that are available on the product pages. So that's my Amazon link. It's an affiliate link that will basically, let's see. Oh, no, I sent it to the wrong person. Oh no. Okay, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to send it to everybody. There we go. My mistake. And then I'm going to pull the link again for the other thing. Just one moment. There we go. This is the charm of Zoom. Okay, now it's to everybody. Now, both of those have gone to everybody. So there's a lot of things that I cover on my YouTube channel about hybrid meetings, and I want to thank you for taking the opportunity, or for giving me the opportunity to share some of my ideas. I'm going to hand this back over to Jace.
Yes, thank you very much, Marcus. Let's give Marcus another round of applause in appreciation for spending his valuable time with us. Thank you for your valuable information, your Q&A, and I do have to say there's great information on your website as well as your YouTube channel. I know I personally used it. Check it out because I know there's more questions in the chat that we didn't necessarily get to. Most of them, I think there's answers out there, as well as this entire Toastmasters community is all trying to figure this out together. And I think the big thing, don't be afraid to experiment, give things a try. Start simple and grow from there, and just go out and do it. So with that, we are at 10:10. So our session is ended. We will now jump in.